Hello and welcome to the presentation by Alex and Sarah on plain spadefoot frogs. The Latin name is Spea Bombifrons and they exist in North America along with the Couch's spadefoot, the eastern spadefoot, and several others from California to here in New Mexico. We're going to be discussing the description of them, where they live, some of their behaviors, and some of their distinguishing characteristics, along with how they are used in science and what they can teach us about people's opinions and experiences in biology and the natural world. So the distribution of spadefoots is surprisingly varied. They exist in a wide range of conditions. They are found from California to the East Coast. They are found from Canada to Mexico. They exist anywhere where there is loose sandy soil, because the one distinguishing feature about spadefoots that most people know is that they are fossorial and burrowers. They will burrow anywhere where the soil is loose enough for them to dig and dry enough for them to not actually drown. They are not usually found in areas of permanently mud, and they do not like to exist in places where there is permanent marshland because of competition from other amphibians and natural predators. They are actually well known in the prairie lands, which is where they were first described by Cope in 1860s-ish. During the Second World War, they were discovered and some books were written about them. And those species, even though they are very similar to New Mexico's spadefoot, are actually a very different behavioral creature. So some of the defining characteristics of the Spea Bombifrons is that they are a small fat toad, very different than the skinny canyon tree frogs that are found in North America. They are very different than the very large bullfrogs that are found throughout most of the continental US. They are not very toad-like in the shape and color of their skin. They are far less tubular. They are usually very chubby because they spend a lot of time collecting food to survive the estivation period underground. They have a heavily ossified skull. This is probably a basal trait, but also helps them with their behaviors of digging. Some people have described them as a backwards wombat, whereas a wombat has strong claws on the front of its feet and has a heavily armored backside. These small frogs have claws for digging on their back feet and a heavily ossified skull for pushing the dirt out of the way when they come back up to the surface. The identifying feature of a Spea Bombifrons is a cranial boss found between the eyes. It's not showing well in this picture, and as a result, I highlighted it with this line photograph down here. Also, another identifying feature of all of these types of spadefoots is obviously the digging spade on the hind foot that we will come back to later. Unusually, for frogs, they have vertical pupils, and this is related to their lifestyle. Close to the ground, ambush predators tend to have vertical pupils for many different reasons that it's explained in scholarly reports, but we aren't going to go over too much here. An amphibian that lives in a xeric landscape has a lot of behavioral adaptations which are necessary to survive, and is used actually by humans to understand evolution and adaptability. That's one of the main reasons why this particular species is important to us. Now, the wedge-shaped spade is specific to Spea Bombifrons. You have to flip the frog over to see this. On the top you see the wedge shape where it is as long as it is wide. Down below is the more commonly known as Couch's spadefoot in one of the Scaphiopus species. It's more sickle-shaped. It's wider than it is long. It looks like a big thumb on the prehalus. This isn't only found in this particular species. There are often found similar ones like this on large toads that's in large burrows along stream banks. The vertical pupils are found in this particular genus. There are lots of information about vertical pupils found. They are seen in many other different species. There is a picture of the frog on the bottom left. They are interestingly also found in the African skimmer bird, because this is a bird close to the ground. It's theorized this gives them better depth perception when they are looking for prey items. The green rods are only found in amphibians. This gives them very good low light level abilities and evolved differently than from a cat. Eyes have evolved many times independently, and people are still studying that. Moving on from the actual description of the creatures, frogs in general are very popular in literature, and spadefoot frogs in particular have been found in this popular elementary school book about a homesick kid who finds spadefoots in Massachusetts and relates to them from his previous living in Arizona. The problem with a lot of scientific communication is you can lose many details. It's a small point, but a spadefoot toad doesn't exist. These are actually a frog species. Toads have drier skin, have similar lifestyle, but a very different adaptation that they've developed. It takes a while to learn biology. It's important to start at an elementary school level. It's also important that we must teach why it's important that conservation is vital to humans. And of course, frogs can teach us a lot about the science behind some of the things that people believe. One of the things that we have been able to learn and have studied in quite a lot of detail in North Carolina University is the mate choices made by a female Spea multiplicator. A female multiplicator is likely to breed with a faster developing conspecific Spea Bombifrons if they are in conditions where the multiplicator is not going to thrive as well. This is generally modeled by the poorly fed females. While a multiplicator will find itself in a situation where it'll breed with Bombifrons, they will survive, but all the hybrid offspring produced male will be infertile, and the females will have a lower fitness. But it is a better use of genetics if you can provide some of your offspring a chance to thrive. The Bombifrons do better where there is species related to them, and there is fairy shrimp. The Multiplicata do better where there is a dietary choice of algae only. The biologists view a female's choice of partner is more than just the physical traits of the male. The lab has been able to identify that the female choice is important as well, and that they tend to choose based on prevailing conditions. Mate choice is a very subtle affair and has been proven to be related to environment, personal health, and many other factors that we are only starting to consider. This has many implications in our wider field. One of the other labs, in a related fashion, is the use of understanding tadpoles for plasticity. Spea Bombifrons has two morphs, which allows them to adapt in a more xeric landscape. They can eat meat in the form of fairy shrimp and each other, and they can be omnivorous on algae. How they choose which one to be seems to be related to the conditions they find themselves in the ephemeral pools that they breed in. This is a brand new hypothesis and is still being developed. It is exciting because it can model how an organism will respond rapidly to something like climate change. The mechanism is important to try to figure out whether this is a good or a bad thing, and the exciting part is this is non-genetic adaptation. Even though the phenotypes that are developed will evolve into a change in genetics over time, as shown in this graphic. Where the selection acts on different species, the adaptive refinement and the novel polyphenism is important because it shows what species can change. The Bombifrons is getting a lot of notice in being one of the very few carnivorous tadpoles that we know of, and has a very distinctive change in beak behavior, size, and feeding strategies. This tells us that the tadpoles are able to survive in a lot of different ecotypes and different morphs. One of the things that we are learning is that apart from just being a strange amphibian, it has more bizarre features than we really understand, and we need a lot more study. Here are some pictures that have been taken by Alexander Price. The one on the right is an example of albino tadpoles, which is a very rare phenomena in the wild, and we don't really understand the mechanism behind it. While they do have melanophores in their body, they're used for different things than they are in mammals. So one of the reasons it's worth studying these creatures is that they are not only a model for understanding non-genetic evolution, but they have unique adaptations for the environment they're in. And these are actually not as related to a xeric lifestyle as we would expect. The model for an organism's ability to adapt rapidly at the genetic level is important, and they are more widespread than we've given them credit for. They also hybridize a lot faster, so defining which ones are species is important. But that being said, it is a xeric specialist with some adaptations that can survive in disturbed areas, mostly because it prefers places with few competitors or predators. But we still don't understand the implications of how these amphibians adapt to humans in their environment.